This demonstration could be a little bit challenging, and it all depends on how well you can manipulate graphs and how comfortable you feel with graphs. So I'll go through it the direction I attack graphing a histogram. And if there's another way, if there's something that you find easier, please feel free to email your instructor, leave a comment on YouTube so that we can correct this video if there's an easier way. So, picking up where we ended with the frequency distribution, I'm using the Excel worksheet, Excel demonstration, store a histogram. So at the end of the last video, we had gotten to the point of having a group frequency distribution created or constructed, including the cumulative frequency and the midpoint. And the reason that we did that is so that we could do our graphing now, and we could do the histogram, the ogive, and the frequency polygon. So we're going to start with the histogram. So the histogram is going to use class boundaries, and then its frequency is going to go along the y-axis. So what I'm going to do in this one's case is I'm going to take these three, lower class, upper class, and the frequency, and I'm going to copy them into a new worksheet called histogram. So copy, I'm going to add, we'll put it here, and I want to paste, I want to just paste the values. I don't want to paste with the first one because it'll bring the formulas along with it, and it will say error. So lower class boundary, upper class boundary, and the frequency is what I copied over to this separate worksheet. Now what happens is I want to create this graph. So I want to create the graph, and it needs to be a bar graph. And the bar graph, so I'm going to start with the upper class boundary and the frequency. So I'm going to use these two, and I'm going to insert a bar chart. Then what happens is I get this. So I'm going over to pick my data selection. This can be a little bit different depending on what version of Excel that you have. And what happens is it's graphing the upper class boundary against its frequency. And so I want it to only have the frequency. And then here I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to put the upper class boundary here. And I'm going to click on OK. So now I kind of have something. I'm moving towards a histogram. I know for sure that the bars have to touch. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to click on the data again. So when I click on it, I get this pop-up over here that says gap width. And so did you notice that I clicked on the data point? So notice where the four little corner points came up. And so I clicked on that, and this pop-up came up over to the right. I want to make my gap width, that's the width between the bars, 0. So because I want them to touch. So I'm going across, I'm going to put these as 0, enter. So now the bars touch, everything is great. The one thing that I do realize is that I really am not starting at 0, 0. And so I'd like to create a gap there so that I can let everybody know that that lower class limit does not start at 0, 0. So what I'm going to do now is I'm coming up to my data, and I'm going to insert a line in. And then I'm going to put the lower class boundary in here, 1.985. And that's because the edge of this first bar should be at that lower class boundary. And that way I have an indication of that left-hand side. And I'm going to put a frequency of 0 because there's nothing there. So this is how I'm going to get an extra bar in there. And then I'm going to look at the data again. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to stretch my bar up to capture those two. So notice what happens. So now I have this gap. Now let's at least, so the issue that I have, so we can title this. Let's come up here and create the title. So I'm going to say histogram of store A prices. So I've at least got a title of my chart. So I've got a title on the chart. I've got an axis along here. This legend is coming along with me. I'm going to delete that. I don't want that legend to be there at all. So now the next thing that happens is now I'm going to add a chart element. So I'm going to add a chart element. I'm going to put some axis titles on here. So my primary horizontal price. I called it price of items. And maybe I should say in dollars. Even though, because we're using boundaries, the dollars are strange, but they're still in dollars, even though they are $7.415. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here again and add a chart element. I'm going back to the titles, and this time let's do our primary vertical. And let's put frequency. So now we're going to click in here. And I'm going to type in frequency, maybe. And I've got these down here at the end that I want to get rid of. Okay, so now that title says frequency. The bottom says price of items in dollars. Now my problem, and the main problem that you're going to run into, is the labels on the axis. So these labels down here on the horizontal axis, remember when we've talked about them in class, we really want them to be on the edges of the bars. So this 1.985 needs to be here on this edge. This 3.795 needs to be over here on this edge. This one needs to go over here. This one needs to go over here. The 9.225 goes here, and the 11.035 goes way over here on the end. The problem with that is trying to find some way to align those values. So I've tried doing different alignments, left alignment, right alignment. I can never get anything to work. So this is where, if you have any comments, please let me know. Maybe this can make this better and easier for other students when they get to this point in graphing the histogram. What I found that I have to do is I have to try to force those over to the lines. So right now they're centered in the gaps. So they're centered on the bars, almost like they're at a midpoint. And what I found is I just have to change the numbers to text, and I have to manually push them over to where I want them to go. So like I said, please feel free to give me feedback. I come in here and I change this to a text by putting apostrophe in here, and then I'm going to scoot 1.985 over 9 places. And I'm going to look at it. So it needs to go a little bit farther. So I'm going to scoot this over a little bit farther. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I went too far because it bounced it down to the second line. So that was the first thing that I did, was I just forced some spaces in there to get it pushed over to the side. Then what I thought was really strange was when I clicked on here and I looked at my type as far as the numbers are concerned, and I came down here and looked at numbers. And I looked at its placement. So I clicked here, and the strange thing that I found was when I put in a strange custom angle of 2%, why that? I don't know. I could get them to go exactly where I wanted them. So now I'm going to go back to here. I'm going back, and the number that I found worked was 9. I'm going to back that all the way up. So I just wanted to play with this and show you what happens. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And look, I pushed it over. It's sitting on the line. Going to go down to the next one. Tell it that it's text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Push this one over with a text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Push this next one over with the text apostrophe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Push this one over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Last one. So I can decide whether maybe this one, since it's double digit, since it's 11, maybe doesn't go over 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's put that at 8. It scooted it over way on the end. So here's an example of how you trick the system. I got the labels where I wanted them from convention, from what we've talked about in class. So there you go. Let me know if you come up with a different way. We can print this chart out separately. We can click on it and move it out of the way if I want to slip it over here. And then that way I can print out the histogram and the frequency distribution together. So I could go over here like this and see them both side by side. So there's your histogram of store A prices.